The last couple of years, we've started to see Sony really begin to experiment very often with different styles of video game by having tiny indie projects that are very artsy, big AAA projects like God of War, The Last of Us, or things like Uncharted. But what they're trying to do the most is definitely make games to fit different tastes. And what surprises me the most is that there's been this ongoing talking point that Sony is making PlayStation games too hard. And I want to talk about this. What's up, gamers? Dreamcastguy here. Now, what sort of has spurned this is that recently we had the release of Sifu. Sifu is an absolute objective kung fu masterpiece. It has long fight scenes, crazy intense boss fights. It is just set up to be punishing. But here's the thing, 99% of the people who play Sifu are definitely not going to be able to beat it. It has a pretty steep learning curve. It's very, very intensely based on timing and reaction, and I just feel like physically some people are not going to be able to finish it. Now, to me, this is not a problem. Not every video game is supposed to be for every person. And additionally, let me say something kind of controversial. You are not required to beat every single game. Some stuff can come out, can be niche, can be interesting, and it doesn't need to be finished. You can still appreciate something being flashy and cool and different. But what else sort of started this off is the fact that I keep seeing tweets like this where there's been this big discussion about Sifu and Returnal, which are both PlayStation exclusives. Sifu is, of course, also on PC, but a lot of people have basically been saying that the difficulty is too steep. Now, this is definitely the case. I've been going through a bunch of the reviews. Things like Polygon have basically been saying that, Sifu would be great if the controls weren't so brutal and if the game wasn't just so difficult. Now, I think that this talking point is very, very fascinating to me because I am somebody that does enjoy hard games. But Sony puts out a lot of them. I'm not going to try and say that they don't actually just do this on purpose. Returnal, it is a game based on time loops. If you make a big mistake, if you get a randomly extra difficult enemy that kills you just by accident, it starts the entire game again. But the fun of Returnal is trying to explore the alien planets and mastering the controls and stuff like that. But there is a skill that's very important to have, which is being able to take an objective step back, to remove yourself from the situation and try and look at it objectively. Difficulty is not going to be the same for everybody. Some people are going to get frustrated when they die in Returnal, or if they can't even finish the first stage of Sifu, which I have seen some people actually talking about the fact that this game is just so insurmountably difficult. I've seen people straight up saying, look, I've tried to play the game, but it's just not for me. I'm 30 and I'm tired of this get good energy. I think that this is not necessarily a mistake, but what's really beginning to annoy me, though, is that there's this narrative that's sort of spreading across the internet. Now, I want to make it clear, this is a tiny, rather insane fan base that's saying stuff like this, but there are people that are claiming that Sony is trying to make their games harder and harder to artificially increase the playtime. If something kills you a lot, you're going to restart. As somebody who has actually played a lot of games on their hardest difficulty, I can definitely attest that, of course, the more a boss is completely butchering you, the more time it's going to consume. But tweets like this, absolutely, in my opinion, this is flat out, it's ridiculously fake. Right here, these games are made to be artificially hard to increase the gameplay time. It's an illusion, and people are just playing extra time doing the same stuff over and over like an insane person. 5 levels, 30 minutes each for $40. This is a guy trying to talk about Sifu. Every bit of this tweet is 100% wrong. This person is an idiot. Excuse just being so rude, but Sifu is a very, very, very good game. It got a lot of 9s and a lot of 10s. In fact, I gave it a 9 in my review because the game is seriously freaking fun. It's got tight controls and stuff like that. The difficulty, though, is the point. I keep seeing people try and bring up the idea that Sony is trying to do this to just keep you invested in their ecosystem longer. Like even games like God of War, obviously the God of War 2018, it had a very famously difficult extra hard mode called Give Me God of War. Now this is nearly impossible to finish. I'll straight up say it, I like hard games. I could not finish that. I've done a lot of stuff like beating every freaking Resident Evil on the hardest difficulty again and again. I've finished the hardest bosses in World of Warcraft Classic. Like, I've done some extremely hard games, and I always enjoy the journey. But sometimes there is certain difficulties that are too hard even for me. And you know what? I don't consider that a problem. If there is a game that is too hard, I'm not going to try and blame the developers. If something is too tall of a task, that doesn't mean that they're lazy or that they've just increased the damage numbers. One of the pieces of slander that kind of just drives me nuts is people who do not understand the brilliance of Dark Souls. I love Dark Souls so much, and let's talk about something like Demon's Souls was obviously an exclusive for the PlayStation 5. It was a launch game. The remake for Demon's Souls is just utterly refined to perfection. The game is so incredibly good, and what kind of just makes me want to tear my hair out is when people say they've made it hard by just increasing the damage done to you, when that's not what this is at all. They've made a game that is very expertly made. Every enemy, every trap, every sword, every upgrade is made to be a high task, but a beatable task. You are a single person trying to save the world, or sometimes just defeat huge dragon gods and stuff. Do you expect that to be easy? You know, it kind of drives me nuts because there was even this big discussion. My favorite game series of all time is Final Fantasy. I beat the Final Fantasy games again and again. That's been my personal favorite thing to do in the entire world. Well, when Final Fantasy VII Remake came out for the PlayStation 4 and now re-released for the PlayStation 5, it was the first Final Fantasy, at least in my memory, that has a very detailed difficulty system in it. You can turn it all the way down to practically the game playing itself to a very difficult specialty hard mode, which is made to be difficult. There are entire freaking websites dedicated to how to finish Final Fantasy VII Remake on its proper hard difficulty. And the amount of people out there saying that Sony pushed Square Enix to do this, that way they'd make sure that people were playing the Final Fantasy VII Remake longer, this is some tinfoil hat insanity. What I think Sony is trying to do is gather up unique experiences. You know, Sony screws stuff up all the time. I'm not going to act like every one of their games is a banger, but it feels like the taste makers over at Sony, the people that are trying to gather together their exclusives to figure out their projects, it feels like they want a wide range of tastes. Ratchet & Clank is one of the easiest games ever. Kena Bridges Spirits is an incredibly easy game once you get used to the controls. A lot of these games are made to be different styles of art, of environment, of storytelling, and of course, of difficulty. If you think a game is too hard, instead of complaining about it, instead of laying in your bed at night wondering why the developers have hurt you personally, maybe consider that not every game is for every person, and that's okay. There's movies that I personally hate that I'm not going to watch. There's books that I've started to read that are just too difficult or too weird or too freaking artsy-fartsy. That's all right. I'm not going to ask a certain author to dumb stuff down so that I can properly understand Kushiel's Dart or whatever. My thought is that art is great when it's different. When this medium really grows and excels the most is when parts of it is just almost inaccessible. I think that everybody should play Sifu. I think that Sifu, even if you can't finish it, I seriously think it's one of those experiences that is so tight, that is so fun, that even losing at it is an important piece of art. But these have just been some off-the-cuff thoughts because honestly, it drives me nuts to hear this. Like, straight up, if you actually look, this experiment is clearly working. Sony's freaking game sales keep going up. They made $11 billion. Like, that's their quarter. Like, Sony knows what they're doing. They're doing this to try and make sure that everybody realizes that you do not have to game the way that other people are. Find your own fun. Just saying. Much love to you guys. I just wanted to talk about this because I'm very passionate about difficulty in games. I love Bloodborne. I'm very, very excited about Elden Ring. I am going to be working on a huge review for Elden Ring. I like that things can be not for everybody. It's all about what you want out of video games. If you want to play Hello Kitty's Island Adventure on easy mode, but guess what, buddy? That's your business. Thank you so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a giant thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all, and keep dreaming. All right. I finally got to make a Hello Kitty joke. I'm happy. I can die happy. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.